Okay, good evening, good day, everybody, depending on when you're going to listen or watch this. Welcome to the Big Blue Bent podcast, season 2, episode 2. I'm your host, Jeff Joseph. With me, we got a pretty full panel again today. We got our own little gang of 5. So let me rotate around here and let's start with Christine Maydossian, who's an advisor at Ryan Affaires Publique, and she's previously worked on Parliament Hill and for the city of Toronto under the late Mayor Rob Ford. This is almost getting routine now. Next up down there, down below me, I got Matthew Conway, who's who's currently now with Capitol Hill Group, and also an advisor there. Also, a lot of government background, Parliament Hill and Queens Park in Ontario. He's also on the Conservative Party National Council. He's one of our loyal Quebec representatives, one of 3. Robert Presser is rejoining us again. A man who really probably would want to be a sommelier in another life, but he is an entrepreneur, a strategist, a speechwriter, a former candidate under the Progressive Conservative banner back in the Mulroney years. And last but not least, because we, especially these days with COVID, it always helps to have a medical expert on board. Dr. Roy Eappen, who's also internal medicine specialist, endocrinologist, wizard at the Monarchy, Star Trek. He gets around. He's a pretty good guy, and everybody in the Conservative Party seems to know him. And he's been photographed with the Queen, so let's give him our respect. All right, guys, it's funny. We haven't. I think this is about 9 or 10 days since we taped. A lot of stuff happened. You know what? But we want to kick it off because at the end of the last show, Robert was showing us his beautiful Russian accent. So on that note, let's talk about a kind of topic that seems to not been talked about the last 3 years in Canada and foreign policy. And let's particularly take a look at the whole situation in Ukraine and how our friends in the Liberal government have approached it. We seem to be getting all this word that Russia could be invading Ukraine at any moment, and there's tense negotiations involved, and Joe Biden's involved with it in the States, and we've heard words from Britain and Canada. I'm going to start here because I think let's go Dr. Roy first. Canada's policy approach from a non-policy guy perspective. You think we've got Putin under control? Is Melanie Jolie going to be the great force that stops him from doing this?
Well, we have apparently now that we have cabinet ministers doing hashtags with little pieces of paper in their backyard. Putin has decided to withdraw all troops and go on holiday in his dacha. Look, we are increasingly a non-entity in foreign affairs. Our allies don't trust us. Our allies are having meetings and they're not including us. I hope Putin doesn't do anything, but NATO has activated 40,000 troops, and the British have sent huge amounts of ammunition and tanks and things. In fact, in Ukraine, God Save the Queen is trending on Ukrainian Twitter because of the amount of help the British have been sending. Look, if Ukraine falls, Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia are much smaller pieces. I don't think that Putin has the power to do any of this, but you know what? I would watch during the Olympics what the Chinese and the Russians are going to do.
Fair enough. Before I get to the policy experts, Robert, maybe hold back the Russian accent for a second. What do we got here? So our hashtags and social media threats, the new thing in terms of how do we approach foreign policy? Is this the way to go?
I don't even pay attention to the hashtags and what's trending on social media.
Of course.
What I do look at is a very important statement that has been lacking, which is that no one is committing troops onto Ukrainian territory.
Yeah.
So you have to assume that the Russians are going to do something. And if I was Vladimir Putin, I would move troops in and I would secure the Donetsk region completely in the same way as he annexed Crimea. Because to me, this is a 21st century Sudetenland issue. Yeah. It is a perfect parallel. And you have some European leaders moaning today that Macron says we're going to have a new security pact with Russia. Oh my God, it's the language of Munich 1938 all over again. And we're going to let them take the Donetsk with assurances that this is the end of their encroachment. And we're ultimately going to give up a whole no man's land of everything to the west of Donetsk. We're probably even going to create a military buffer zone inside the NATO members that border on Ukraine, where they will try to demilitarize. I think the only hope the Ukrainians have is using the British anti-tank weapons that have been offered. They may be able, with the proper training, to actually inflict serious losses on the Russian mechanized force as they move forwards. They can't stop them, but they can embarrass them, or they can just barely slow them down. But, you know, Canada has very bravely offered a $120 million development loan within existing policies. I think this is just wonderful to help the war effort. But when it shows you that we're irrelevant, money is not what you need right now. Guns and bullets, and more specifically, anti-tank weaponry is really what you need. And an air-to-surface missile barrage is really what they're going to need when hundreds of tanks and troop carriers roll across that border. Let's not forget that Russian leaders generally don't die in office. I mean, they do die. I mean, we've had some die, but it's much more entertaining when they're deposed. And if Putin pulls back and suffers that kind of embarrassment without trying any incursion whatsoever, that is the end of his regime. Yeah. He will be deposed by somebody else who is either for a much more violent incursion into Ukraine or was completely against the incursion in the first place. Putin is not the only mind out there in Russia. There are other opposing camps. We're just not hearing from them.
Matthew.
So I actually have a scoop for my friends on the panel and our loyal listeners and watchers. So to stop Vladimir Putin's scoring prowess, because he scored 7 goals in a game earlier this month, the Liberals are bringing Ken Dryden out of retirement to stop him and to stone him. So, but seriously, that's pretty much what all the Liberals would have to offer, anyways. But on a serious note, two observations. One is the mythical line in the sand keeps moving backwards. It just seems like, like Robert was just saying, well, you can take this, but don't do it anymore. And it just seems like everybody's powerless to do anything. And it seems like everybody's trigger happy, not trigger happy, but anti-trigger happy, yeah, to do anything. And so how many Ukrainians are going to have to lose their lives before somebody else wakes up and does anything about it? But the word appeasement keeps coming into my mind, and this is pretty much what it is. And it's not hashtags with pictures that, to me, that's just another sign of a government that's not serious. Plain and simple.
You got to remember that we all signed there were several powers that signed a treaty to withdraw nuclear weapons from Ukraine, guaranteeing the sovereignty of Ukraine. So the lesson is, don't give up your nuclear weapons.
Great, Christine. What's again? This is foreign policy. What has happened?
I'm going to take a little bit of a different approach on this.
Thank you.
So, being Armenian and living through the war last year, I'm very familiar with the Russian approach. Russia is a very different animal than what we know in the West. They're extremely powerful. They have a lot of secret strengths. They have a lot of secret agreements with other powerful nations in the region. And with respect to their political strategy, we probably only know 5% of it. They're a very dangerous country when it comes to this kind of situation now. During the war in Armenia, of course, they came out to be, the country that helped us get out of it. They weren't, but that's what it looked like. They brought in their tanks to protect the lands that we kept, that Turkey didn't take, that Azerbaijan didn't take. But the reality is they're not protecting us. They're just holding tight with their tanks until somebody comes and takes over those lands. Everybody knows that. Russia doesn't want anybody in the region to gain strength. In fact, when the European Union was created, it was created probably 80% of its purpose was to ensure that Russia didn't take back its Eastern Bloc. They don't talk about that, but that was the reason. And now Russia is angry. Turkey wants back what it had 100 years ago. Russia wants back what it had 30 years ago. There is a huge, huge offensive happening in the region. Turkey and Russia are working together to get back a lot of the things they lost in the past few decades. And that's the reality of it. We lived through that last year. That's why it's dangerous. We don't know what they're doing. And it's scary. It's very scary. Ukraine isn't, it happened with Armenia, then it happened with the Baltic states. Now it's happening with the Ukraine, and who knows which Eastern European country is next. That's my experience. That's my approach. But we can't guess what they're doing. And there are some really, really, really dangerous people, not just in Russia, but in that region, who are making agreements behind a curtain. They've been doing it for centuries. They know how to do it. So, we just have to sit back and watch. There's nothing we can do, especially not somebody like Mélanie Joly, who would probably be balanced on the pinky finger of Vladimir Putin. And I agree with Robert. He's not going to be around. If there's somebody more, the thing with Vladimir Putin is this: he's been around so long that he's developed relationships and secret alliances with enough powerful people to keep him in place, right? Yeah. And that includes all sorts of oligarchs from all sorts of countries. But there may come a time where he may have to go, and that all depends on how things develop in the region.
Yeah, but here's an interesting. I just personally, I find it. This whole thing, the Liberals suddenly having the level of interest in Ukraine that it does, this has the smell of Chrystia Freeland all over it.
Of course.
This is her kind. All of a sudden, this looks like this is very much, it's all about for Chrystia, and maybe it's the right thing to do. I don't know about the approach to it, but this has got Chrystia Freeland, because I keep thinking, I know back in the Stephen Harper days, this Conservative Party really took an interest in anything Ukraine. I mean, Jason Kenney, that's Jason Kenney took a lot of interest in immigrant groups or whatever, but his passion for the Ukrainians was unbelievable. But I used to remember a lot that the Conservatives, when we took stands that we did with Ukraine, and we're all about making sure Ukraine remain free from Russian aggression and hostility, you would always kind of hear in the Liberal camp, you'd kind of say, oh, you see, there's the Conservative, they're going to bed with those Ukrainian fascists, right? Because remember, from a Russian standpoint, Ukraine is like a fascist nation. And that's what we've heard. But this whole thing smells like Freeland.
Well, so also Ukrainians are very prominent on the prairies, and who do prairie ridings vote for? The Conservatives. So the Liberals probably is like, yeah, well, we have nothing to lose by calling them names.
Yeah.
Robert? We don't have a lot to offer from a military perspective, aside from the trainers and we'll call it lightly equipped troops that we left in Europe. We have no capability of rapidly deploying forces of any significance that could not be deployed more quickly by a European power.
We can't even do air support.
Well, we used to have CF-18s based in Lars in West Germany at the time. One of my former board members at Defense Construction Canada was actually one of the last commanders at Lars. Now, that was in the 80s when the CF-18s were new.
Yep.
It would be really interesting to try to forward deploy at this point 40-year-old aircraft, and you would have to say forward deploy 24 of them to have any significant contribution on behalf of NATO, which would leave us with maybe 40 airworthy CF-18s for the defense of Canadian skies, because we've only got about 60 odd that are airworthy at any one time, and we pilfer parts off the old ones. Yes, we bought some used ones from the Australians, whatever it is, it's a little pathetic. So there's not a lot we can do beyond training and moral support.
Yeah.
But the interesting thing is that this would be the first conflict we've seen in what I would call a first world setting. If you look at the war in Afghanistan, and then you look at the conflicts in the Middle East, which were horribly one-sided, this potentially is the first clash of first world armies with relatively well-matched weaponry. An anti-tank weapon is an extremely powerful weapon. So if you have enough of that stuff, you can stop an armored division if people know how to use it. So it's really the first time since the end of the Second World War that we would see significant conflict in Europe beyond a skirmish or such a lopsided matchup that it wasn't even close. But Christine's comments about the old empires is very telling. It's not only Russia, it's China, it's Iran, it's as she mentioned, the Turks. All the old empires are reasserting their influence in their geographic spheres, and this is not going to go away.
And who's going to stop them?
Well, and there is no sense of pan-Europeanism. In other words, the economic bloc of Western Europe did not produce the kind of, shall we say, social solidarity and Western Europe as one voice as the European Union was supposed to produce. Europe is divided, the West is divided. They are not going to step in and defend a piece of territory that is not contiguous to NATO's territory yet, in the same way as Chamberlain did not defend the Sudetenland far away from its home.
So I want to point out that the International Energy Agency said that where Canada could have helped is that we could have shipped liquid natural gas to our allies, therefore denying Russia of one of its major sources of income, and they have very little major sources of income.
Sure.
And if we had been a real country, a serious nation, we would have built that LNG port in Vancouver, and we would be shipping gas and natural gas to our allies who desperately need our help in that respect. And that would be a major contribution that Canada could have made, and we have not done that.
Don't seem to have any interest in doing it. Anyway,
the Americans are talking to the Qataris about supplying Western Europe with gas. I'm serious.
Because that's a democratic country.
I'm just going to pick up on one thing.
Yeah, go for it.
The European Union was far stronger 15 years ago, even 10 years ago, than it is today. And one of the key reasons for that, obviously, is COVID. But I was an intern at the Canadian mission to the European Union in 2009, and that was the peak. That was when we had just started negotiating the Canada-EU Free Trade Agreement. That was the peak of the European Union's strength. And at that point, just like Robert said, Western Europe thought, France, Germany, Italy, at that time, the UK was a member. In fact, the UK not being a member anymore has, whether we like it or not, weakened the European Union, right? So
that has always been the goal of the UK. The UK has always wanted to weaken Europe.
And they did it. and they did it. And I mean, sure, France and Germany still have powerful economies, but if you really think about it, I mean, Switzerland, I mean, it's a bigger economy, but it's not part of the union, right? It's part of Schengen, but not.
Make patches.
There you go. So
What?
I'm not wearing mine. Yes. But if you think about, okay, what are the strongest economies right now in Europe, aside from France and Germany, there isn't much else, right? And the European blocs are growing. The economic development is not happening on the west side, it's happening on the east side, whether it has to do with textile manufacturing, natural resources, innovation, entrepreneurship. You talk about the Baltic states, you talk about Romania, Bulgaria, these countries are growing, right?
Yep.
Russia knows that. In fact, Russia has been helping these countries grow. It's a really, really interesting dynamic, and I'm really, I'm interested to see how it's going to develop, because boy, does Russia have things up its sleeve.
Except the problem for the Russians is the Russians are in terrible economic shape. They have an economy that's basically the size of Canada's, with 5 times the population. And
well, this is a good distraction.
That's exactly right. That was the point I was going to make. It's always a good thing to invade other countries when your own people are starving. But after a while, there are going to be Russian boys and girls being sent home in body bags, and that's not going to go over well in the motherland either. This was what happened in Chechnya. Remember, the Russians blew up their own buildings and said the Chechens did it and invaded Chechnya for a while. But you can't. I don't think they can sustain these invasions. They don't have the money to manage empire. You need to put troops in place. You need to put administrators in place. They don't have that money.
So as for Europe, all I would say is, for those who don't learn from history are doomed to repeat it. To me, I look at the European Union, it's a bunch of pacifists and essentially wusses, for the lack of a better term, and Putin and the Russian structure and Turkey and all these empire builders know this, and they know that, oh, you don't do that, and there's a line in the sand. But they know, like I was saying, the line in the sand is going to keep backing up. And who knows what Joe Biden's thinking one day to another? Who knows if Joe Biden's really actually in control?
I think Joe Biden, I think the first thing on Joe Biden's mind in the morning is which pills do I have to take today? I know you want to move on to another topic, Jeff, but very quickly.
Go, Kirsten.
I just want to pick up on something Dr. Roy said. Yes, the Russian economy is very weak. Think about it. The Turkish economy is also very weak. But what are they doing? They're using all the power they have to latch on to what they can. So, think about, the Turkish economy is so bad. People are starving on the streets, but guess what? They're using their taxpayers' dollars to lobby the world to ensure that they get what they want. Russia's almost doing the same thing, maybe not in the US, but in other parts of the world. So again, very excited to see what's going to happen. And I want to hear Robert's accent.
Yes, you better keep vodka cold in fridge. We are coming. Sure. You are understanding what I'm saying to you? Just wait. These boots are made for walking all over Ukraine, stopping at Russia, not stopping at border, coming to Romania, Bulgaria, coming soon to a former partner near you. Yes.
Cheers.
Anyway, all right. Speaking of weak economies, let's bring it back home. Canada. Okay, so our COVID situation right now. So now we have an interesting kind of thing going on. So we have particularly Ontario, Quebec, engaging in some very, very big, bizarre experiments on how to loosen up restrictions. I mean, if you're in Florida or something, or most of the US or most of the world, you're probably laughing at this whole thing. So we've apparently are trusting some new science here with some bizarre attempts to slowly bring at least Ontario and Quebec, most of Canada, out of this current lockdown, curfew, etc. state. Conversely, interestingly enough, we go to Europe and maybe because they're economies, Over in Europe, though, we've got this situation now. Boris Johnson, he basically, he's drawing the masks are going, everything's going there. Everybody seems to, half of Europe seems to be following through right now. They're just saying, listen, we're living with it. Actually, even the European, the scientific council there, I forgot the name, Dr. Royal, no. They basically said, listen, it's time to start treating COVID like the flu. We got to move on. So everybody's dropping there. We're Canada we're doing this little inching out. From a medical perspective, Doc, I'm sure you're going to tell me there's some wonderful science behind what's going on in Quebec and Ontario right now that's going to happen over the next few weeks. Please share it with us.
I mean, there isn't. And, the public health and Mr. Arruda, who was the chief medical officer in
Horatio
Quebec,
Arruda in Quebec, yeah,
has actually resigned. And part of the reason is when they put in this curfew, he said there was no evidence that this curfew worked, and there isn't. There were only two places that did this curfew, from what I understand, France and Quebec. And I don't think we benefit from it. And I think, we are going to drive children into depression. The rates of anorexia nervosa have gone through the roof. There's going to be 10 years. There's going to be a lost generation of children who will not go back to school. The problem with all of these measures is we were not measured. We did not look at the consequence to the action. And one of my friends, Dr. Vinay Prasad, who's an MPH out of San Francisco, said, we haven't done RCTs in any of these things. We have not done control trials to see. And the other thing that I have to point out is that the vaccine companies have not released their raw data on their trials. The British Medical Journal a couple of days ago said, why aren't you releasing the raw data so that we can do the analysis? Because right now, vaccines are becoming sort of a great profit margin for these three companies that made them. And I'm become, the Israelis, Benny Gantz just was declared with COVID after his fourth shot. I mean,
yep.
I believe in the vaccines, but I don't think these endless shots are actually going to help. And I think they're actually causing.
Okay, but in fairness here, I have to tell you, obviously, there's obviously a profit motive here, but in fairness to say Pfizer and Moderna at the very least, they never have really said that the third shot is the way to go.
Oh, they have actually. They're saying they need a third and a fourth shot. They announced the third shot would be a good idea right before their general annual meeting.
Okay, because they've both kind of indicated that they're supposedly working on developing a vaccine that's more effective to do better with Omicron. But
so I think what we have learned from the vaccines is they're actually very effective in preventing death and serious disease, and that's good. Okay. So the vaccine passports are a dumb idea. That right now in Quebec, where can I go that I could use a vaccine passport?
Okay, so for the benefit of the audience,
big box stores.
Yeah, actually, as we say, so today in Quebec, the vaccine passport extended to big box stores. Now the full restaurants haven't reopened yet, and cinemas and whatever. But today was the grand day to start the vaccine passport in the big box store, large retail outlets. Thoughts on this? Anyone? Matthew?
I'm just sick and tired of all this, and I want to go back to normal. That being said, I know here's the thing. So I saw the daily numbers here in Quebec, and they said that a certain number, I can't remember the exact number of people were hospitalized. Now, we've heard from other jurisdictions that a lot of the people admitted to the hospital had COVID, but they weren't going to the hospital for COVID. So are we seeing I just find that the number of people who are going into the hospital in Quebec, and I think it's the same thing in Ontario, is high. And I'm not saying for some cases with underlying health issues there could be issues, but are they all in there for COVID, or are they just happen to have COVID when they go in?
So in Ontario, at least 46%, the Minister of Health there said that 46% of the people in the Ontario hospitals are with COVID, not for COVID.
Yeah.
And that's the numbers in the rest of the jurisdictions are somewhere between 40 and 60% are with COVID. Pretty much everyone's getting COVID. They're now thinking that 30 to 50% of the population of the world is going to get this in the next little while. And that should be the end. It's going to be an endemic disease that's going to be like other respiratory diseases, and we need to learn how to live with it. This constant closing down is not helping.
So those make big numbers when news networks, TVA Nouvelle, for instance, breaking news, and and it just looks like it's the end of the world. And I think it's not accurate. It's not, and like I said, we still have an issue. I was talking to someone last week who said, "Oh, well, we should have kept the schools closed for another 2 weeks." And I said, "Are you nuts?" Parents could not sustain the Zoom masters, if you will, for their kids' education. And like, you could just see it on parents' faces. If another 2 weeks of their kids at home, I think people would have literally gone, excuse the term, nuts. And like I said, and like I said in a previous episode, and Dr. Roy just said, I think the bill that we're going to have to pay for all this is going to be very expensive, and it's going to be expensive for many, many years to come. And I think that's the part where the government, by issues management, where the short-term solution takes care of today, and we'll worry about tomorrow. But I think that's the thing. They have been short-term, and they haven't worried about tomorrow, and because they're not going to be around tomorrow, it will be somebody else's problem. But I think they're doing a massive injustice to the youth and our society for some of the decisions they were making. And I think it's just because some people don't like reading bad news in the newspapers or on TV, and basically just want to shut everything down. And I think it's just unfortunate that we've had this knee-jerk reaction, and then you have journalists who are egging them on. And I think those people should be held to account on what they're writing. And I'm not saying people, some of what they're writing is blatantly false as well. So I think, but most people I talk to, people are just sick and tired of this. They feel cooped up. Their mental health is suffering. They can't go to a restaurant. I think of all the people working in restaurants right now. They're out of a job. Restaurants, yeah, they can do takeout, but their numbers are down 70%. They still have rent to pay. They still have, some of them have invested, taken out loans for it. So we're in a situation where we're not only killing industries, but we're killing people in just another different way.
Now, to answer your question, Matthew, 3,299 hospitalizations in Quebec as of today. And it is rather pathetic to imagine that 3,300 hospitalizations, according to the government's characterization, is bringing the hospital system to its knees.
Well, yeah, exactly.
This demonstrates.
You're absolutely right, Robert. We are a province of 8 million people.
Yeah. So 3,300 people are sick with COVID. About half came in there for something else. And this is the undermining of the healthcare system as we know it. This is the true pathetic lesson of the COVID experience. The fragility of our healthcare system, the processes, whatever we're doing, for all this money we're throwing at it, something is wrong. Very wrong.
Listen, as I said, pandemic, endemic, I'll more than bet right now. I'll bet, because I'm going to put this right on tape right now. I will more than bet that next winter we're going to hear again about hospitalization. But you know what? We've had flu forever. We always say flu in a good year would kill 3,000 to 5,000 people across Canada. On a bad year, close to 10,000. I would, when we talk about all these numbers now, I would like to have some comparisons to what we were doing like pre-pandemic, because I'm pretty sure I would more than bet that we had at this point 2 years ago, 3 years ago, I bet you we had 3,000 people in the hospital, 4,000 people, probably with flu or offshoots of flu or something like that. And listen, I'm not saying COVID is not COVID is some bad stuff, especially was bad stuff before we had vaccines. There's no doubt about it. But like I said, we're not comparing things like again, you're right. Why we have people, but we're a province of 8 million people. We should be able to absorb this correctly. It shouldn't be
and
that
so
big a
many more
problem.
have it.
Not logical. And maybe
It's not.
2 years ago, when this started, things were uncertain and people watched too many movies and they thought that, it was the end of the world. But we're 2 years in, we've got vaccines, people are recovering. And what's happened to the flu? It's just been replaced by COVID, right?
Okay, hold
So
on.
what-
I want you to play a game with
Robert,
me.
hang on, Robert, go. Yeah,
Yeah.
Robert.
Just quickly, we're playing COVID roulette in my house. Okay. On the same day that my younger son returns to CJEP at Dawson with 12,000 of his friends, I'm walking into a trade show in Las Vegas with 30,000 of my friends. Now, we are all triple and one of us quadruple vaccinated in our house. The game is, who brings it home first? Me from Vegas or Chaz from Dawson?
So the problem,
My money's on Dawson.
I think it's going to be you.
so
No, I
the
think it's gonna be
problem-
Dawson.
Oh, it's going to be Dawson.
The problem is a lot of the people who are getting this variant of COVID don't even notice it. Like they get a couple of
No.
sniffles and that's it. So we probably shouldn't be testing. We're having dozens of people show up in the hospital with these rapid testing. We've tested positive. What do we do now?
Stay home.
Exactly right. Stay home. Isolate for 5 days. Stay home. Drink plenty of liquids. Drink some chicken soup and
But I
stay
took
at
the-
home.
But I took the bus and metro to get here. But so I just want to say one thing. Before somebody misquotes us and identifies us as a bunch of evil conservatives, I just want to say everybody on this panel is vaccinated. We
I'm
believe in
triple
vaccinated.
vaccinated.
So am I. I'm triple vaccinated. We believe in vaccinations. We believe people should be vaccinated. So before somebody
100%.
goes out as we're all these, these conspiracy theorists. No, we're
I
just
believe
people.
in the vaccine, but I believe that we should be much more measured in our approach. That's all I'm saying.
And to talk about Robert's numbers, wasn't it like 200 something in ICUs in a province of 8 million?
69.
Like, I'm sorry, if your system is predicated on the fact that 200 whatever people in ICU and your system's going to collapse, then I'm sorry,
No,
it's
for
not
30
it's not a system worth its name.
So for 30 years, we've been closing hospital beds. So I'm sure you probably, some of you, Robert and I remember, but Pauline Mavoie closed 14
I
hospitals
remember.
at one point. When we merged the big hospitals into those so-called super hospitals, we also lost hundreds of beds there too. So we have made a conscious choice. In the last 2 years, what have we done to increase capacity?
Exactly. This didn't happen yesterday. 3-4 months into the pandemic, we should have done something about this.
We did. We gave SNC Lavalin $150 million to build a field hospital. Where is the field hospital? Where is it?
Yeah. I mean, not to use China as an example, I wouldn't want to do that, but they built a hospital in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Do you
a
remember
full-fledged
that?
hospital. Yeah, I remember it very well.
Right? We've
but
had
that's-
2 years where, I mean, didn't we learn? Like, if you think about it, it's 24 months.
Yeah.
It's 24 months. In
I think-
24 months, people build cities.
I
But
just
we've also spent hundreds of billions of dollars. Where is
Yeah.
all this money
On
gone?
what?
The government of Canada has spent something like an extra $300 billion. Maybe some of that has gone for COVID.
The Auditor General can't even look at it.
Yeah,
No.
exactly. So I keep
Yeah.
asking people, they have huge infrastructure programs. Have any of you seen a new bridge, a new
No,
road being built,
no,
and the
no.
roads being fixed? Nothing.
So
Nothing.
even if we think about the fact that, let's say, a government wanted to do something, let's say build hospitals or whatever, right? Is the administrative structure of our government so bloated that you'd have to go through an environment test? You'd have to go through all the bureaucracy in the healthcare system to get anything done, and person X would have to certify it. Person Y would have to have his or her kind of piece of the pie, so to speak. Like, even if they wanted to, they can't get anything done because the system, it's become this bloated monster that nobody can defeat anymore. And even if you're in government and you give orders, we want this, this, and this, and then the bureaucrats come back and tell you the list of reasons why it can't be done. And that's a daily occurrence in whatever government, whatever stripe they are. So we've let all governments, we've let the bureaucracy get so bloated that it's immobile, and it just eats everything up. And anybody who goes in there trying to make changes, well, it just kills their desire to keep working there.
In a
So
way, but in a way,
I'm
I'd
gonna-
have to say, yeah.
I'm going to
Doctor.
just point out that for every 2 civil servants that Ontario has for their health system, we have 3.
Yeah. So, but I think also part of the problem is that the governments are able to get away with this because there's this general notion amongst Canadians that we've got this wonderful, we still say we got this wonderful healthcare system that thank goodness it's there if we need it, and we don't get bankrupt from it like the stories we hear from America. But largely, that's really not true.
And no one is calling for American style healthcare system.
No.
That's the thing. Nobody is saying that.
Nobody.
Yeah, your hospital care may not bankrupt you, but it might not cure you either.
Yeah.
No.
So I'm telling you now, we are canceling heart surgeries and cancer surgeries now.
Oh,
That's
God.
what we're
Right.
doing.
And that will kill.
The point of no return.
You know what? I bought myself critical illness insurance a long time ago. My wife and I bought it because we came to the conclusion that if we were ever seriously ill, there is no guarantee that we were going to be able to get ourselves the finest standard of care within the correct time period to save our lives. So with that piece of insurance, I can go anywhere in the world and spend the money to get myself cured if the Canadian system says, I'm sorry, you can't have surgery for 6 months. And I'm very sad that I have to tell you that.
No, it's tragic. It's honestly tragic, but it's true. You know what? I just want to add some. I want to get another topic here because you know what? I'm going to incorporate it. We're coming up on the annual Bell Let's Talk. And it's funny because we're talking about mental health. If there's one redeeming thing I've seen in the last couple of days is we're seeing a few more television interviews, radio interviews, op-ed. There was a glorious op-ed in the Globe and Mail by a medical doctor. And if there's one thing that maybe Let's Talk coming on is we're finally maybe starting to see some signs that we actually start talking about the mental health, particularly of children and youth. And on that subject, I have to bring up one thing. I don't know how many Canadian. It almost went. It came and went in the news cycle, but this whole situation at this youth center in Laval, what absolutely happened there was, and this is all public health, and this was they were isolating youths in windowless rooms, taking away their cell phones, cutting them off. When you talk to parents, they were being fed meals through doors on paper plates. This is beyond. I don't know. Like I can't explain. This is beyond outrageous. And Doc, I know you have some thoughts on this one, this particular one.
I read that story and thought, we don't treat people on death row like that. I mean, my God.
In the name of safety.
In the name of safety, does anyone have and no one questioned this. No one questioned.
No.
Well, this is not a good idea that I should lock a teenager up and take away all of his stuff and put him in a room without a window and not let him out of this room for 10 days. I mean, it's a gross violation of human rights. It's a gross. I mean, and it's completely faded from the. And I don't know how many other times did this happen. I mean, I guarantee this was probably happening in other places.
No,
well,
not enough.
Else, yeah.
Not an isolated incident. I'm thinking because this is policy.
Yeah, and then I'm thinking, I picked up. There was apparently a school, an unidentified school in Toronto. There was a memo sent to parents from a grade 1 class talking about part of the reopening. This, because Ontario reopened the schools, which is great, long overdue. So there's procedures, and they were getting told from the teachers this whole thing, particularly because they said the kids are going to have to wear their, the kids were going to wear their mask all day, no matter what setting they're in. And the best one, I couldn't believe it. They're talking about lunch, and they said, okay, for the lunch, each kid's going to sit at their own desk. They can take their mask off, but they're going to be spread apart. They must only look forward. They can't turn to the left, can't turn to the right. They can only keep the mask off to eat the food, and they're not allowed to talk. They're not allowed to do it. And I'm like, this is Gestapo. Like, you're telling 6-year-old, these are 6-year-old kids. And I'm thinking to myself, a memo like that comes out, and no parent even, there's no parent, there's no media. That's torture. That's
One of the
who would do that?
One of the teachers in Ontario taped a mask to a kid's face.
Yeah. Like, this is like, we're hearing stuff.
Like, what are you, just think about this for a second. This is a time in a kid's life, where they're starting to develop their social skills.
Yeah.
Few years from now, how is that child going to react? How is that child going to develop social skills to even have a simple job? Aren't they thinking, I feel like, that we've lost our sense of priority. Fine, the pandemic happened, it made a lot of people sick, we put in all these measures, I get it. But we've lost our sense of priorities. What's important in the long term? And it seems like even authorities don't know that anymore. That's what's really sad about all of this. And maybe in the rest of the world, they're starting to recognize, like in Europe, they're saying, forget about it. In the US, they're saying, forget. But like in Canada, we're sort of like, we've become this third world country that can't get over this situation, primarily because we don't have an appropriate healthcare system. Yes, but it's almost like people's mentality has been altered, where they don't realize what the priorities are.
I have been extremely disappointed to learn that a lot of my fellow citizens don't value freedom. They don't value something that I find almost sacred.
Well, going back to that situation in Laval and going back to the situation you described it in Toronto, the saying Elvis has left the building, common sense has left the building. I have a 5-year-old, try to tell her to do something. But I think I told you guys on a chat, if I had received a complaint, because that's the other part of that Toronto thing, that they would send a note home to parents to correct the behavior. And I said, if I'd gotten that, well, one, she doesn't listen to me anyway. So, but if I got that, I'd send a note back and saying, I will not be correcting her. She can talk to her friends. If you don't like it, I will pull her from the school and send her somewhere else. And I know people in certain school boards don't have that option, but to me, that's ridiculous. If somebody ever sent a note like that, but that's just somebody not thinking, sending a note like that. But here's the thing, that note went through a lot of approvals before it was sent out.
Oh yeah.
So it went through a lot of people. As far as the Laval situation goes, no, you're right. We wouldn't treat death row inmates like that. To me, I was sickened when I read that, and my eyes actually welled up, and I felt sad for those kids. And I knew somebody who worked at Bat Shop many years ago, and I know that this person would say, well, yeah, you don't know how tough it is for us inside and whatever. And then the only thing is somebody came up with this policy, a robot essentially came up with these policies and thought this was a good idea. And then thinking, and then if these kids, because that's what they are, become aggressive after being locked in with a windowless room, and then you say, oh, well, that kid's aggressive. Excuse the term, but no shit. Like, if you're going to do that to them, it's like, it's dehumanizing them. They're there because they need help to start with. And then you're doing this on top of it. Like, give your heads a shake. Like, when did the system, and somebody will say it's always been like that, but when did the system get so dehumanized? And I think there's just certain people that are in the wrong business. Quite frankly, they're just in the wrong business. If you're coming up with a policy like that, maybe time to get out.
So these kids are wards of the crown. So this is done in my name. This is done in your name.
Yeah.
I mean,
no, but and this is the scary part, because you go, we do this let's talk thing, everybody get, tweet and help raise money, and but also part of it's like, let's have the conversation. And I've been impressed every year by year as more people coming out having that conversation. And I almost should go to Carrie Price in a minute, but I'm going to try not to. We're supposed to have these conversations, and yet you almost wonder, it's like a whole bunch of people, what the conversation be? A whole bunch of give your heads a shake. Like, what? You can't do this to kid. Like, we've done so much damage to them mentally. And it's almost like the one thing left is the last excuse they're clinging to is like, well, 0 to 5-year-olds are not vaccinated yet for COVID. And come on. I mean, the number of deaths in those bottom age groups. I mean, in Canada, 0 to 5 year, you probably could count on one hand. Maybe just start a second, and even then, maybe not even dedicated COVID. There's probably other factors at play here. You're just torturing kids that, by and large, they don't even feel the effects of this thing, and yet
the risk of COVID for most children is much less than the risk of driving them to school.
Well, that's an analogy I've used many
Can
times.
you guys just imagine if we spent a quarter, or let's say half of what we spent on pandemic measures on cancer research?
Yeah.
We probably eradicate cancer.
Pretty
close to it.
Mental health measures.
This is what's killing people. This is what's killing children. This is what's killing, a large portion of the world every second of every day. Why don't we put energy into that?
Maybe the implementing of the 3-digit suicide hotline, but
of course, and that apparently I was talking, I think we were talking about this earlier too, but I was talking to a friend of mine who's a sobriety coach, and the number of overdoses and suicides,
self-medicating
and addictions, just plain addiction, have risen at such a rate. Nobody wants to talk about it. Why? Because, cannabis, alcohol, huge lobbying efforts, but those are the real culprits of some of our biggest tragedies.
In several of the provinces, there have been more deaths from overdoses than there have been from COVID.
Absolutely.
Christine just brought up an interesting point, that really all ages suffer from the effect of COVID mentally in their own way. As an employer of 30-something people in Quebec, I see it. I see, we talk about long-term physical effects of COVID. Well, let me tell you, there are long-term mental effects of COVID. And when people go off the rails, or I find there's an interpersonal conflict over something that we would consider trivial, I try to remind people we're all living still with the stress of COVID. And just because you're in the office and you're allowed to be here and out of your house because we're critical suppliers and we have the right to produce, doesn't mean we're not all suffering in some way. And so literally, I try to tell people, be more understanding of each other, be more accommodating of each other, and just be nicer to each other. And try not to gossip so much. Clearly, you're not busy enough if you have time for gossiping.
It's like those memes. Sorry, Jeff. It's like those memes where, you don't know what somebody else is going through, right? And just try to be nicer to people. It's just treat people with respect.
So what we've done by isolating people is we've forgotten that we are social beings and we need each other. And I think that's, a lot of people seem to have forgotten that.
Just hugging people. Think about it, right? Like I'm a lover. Like I love
you rebel.
I love my lovers. I love that. I love to hug people and kiss people. And today I went to pick up something that was being cleaned and repaired, a coat that was being cleaned and repaired, and I wanted to hug my Uncle George, but I had to ask him, Uncle George, can I hug you? It's like, why do I have to do that? Why do I have to do that? Why do I have to ask somebody if it's okay to hug them? They don't care, obviously, but that human touch is so important. It's what gives us, our daily dose of energy and happiness, good energy. I'm a big believer in that, like a lot of people have lost their sense of energy.
Yeah.
It's very sad. And,
It is.
and it's, just think about, like people who meditate, right? You meditate, you have this energy that you want to share with people, and you can't do that anymore.
No.
Life's too short.
Yeah. Okay. It's just gonna start to wrap it up. Yeah, I'm gonna start to shortly wrap it up here. Actually, you know what? Because it's we finished on the Let's Talk. I'm gonna hold it here. I think we've covered enough for a show for today. I'd like to thank everybody for coming out, Christine and Matthew and Robert and Roy, and I thank all our listeners and our viewers for tuning in. And of course, don't know when you're going to be watching this broadcast, but of course, when we do have the Bell Let's Talk Day, be supportive. Let's have those conversations. I think now we need them more than ever. Let's talk and let's we got to start start enjoying life again. And to all you out there, you try to enjoy it whatever way works best for you. I think I can speak on behalf of everybody when I say something like that. So on that note, good night, everyone. Good day, everyone. And we'll be back soon. Thank you.
I just want to say, sneak preview of a future episode. The Liberals will bring back the Broadcasting Act, also known formally as C10. So that's something we'll be able to debate in the future episode.
Oh, we will. Trust me on that. All right. On that note, thank you, everyone, and have a good day.
Yes.